All right. Hello, this is Anne coming at you from my house in Peoria, Illinois. And this is another podcast episode of The College Mindset. And I have with me here Dr. Han, who is a professor of piano performance here. And I'll just let her introduce herself.
Hi, Anne. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on. I am a professor of piano, and I also teach music theory, the musicianship course at Augie. So the great thing about my job is I get to know pretty much everyone in the music department through teaching the courses and through teaching piano. So that's one of the favorite things about what I do.
Awesome. And then do you want to kind of give a little bit more background? Because I know personally meeting you and having you in class, you have a lot of work history before music too. So how did you get involved with music?
Sure. Like many of us, I've been playing since forever. I started when
Hmm.
I was 5 on the piano and then 6 on the violin.
Oh, awesome.
And I actually got started randomly. I wasn't looking for lessons, I wasn't asking for lessons, but the kindergarten that I went to, which was just by the dorm where my parents, who were grad students at the time, lived, had a music program like in the kindergarten. So I got free piano lessons, free violin lessons. It was kind of like an
That's nice.
amazing public education program that doesn't exist anymore. But I got really lucky. And so my parents kind of saw that I was really into it. And so they kept giving me lessons. And that's probably the only thing I kept up, like all the way through high school. So I was a pianist pretty seriously in high school. I did a lot of competitions, international competitions, festivals, all that sort of thing. But something about that life didn't quite sell me when I was thinking about colleges. And I have a lot of interests. So I wanted to go to college and kind of explore everything. And I knew if I went to music school, I would be in a practice room and I would be practicing, 20, 100 hours a day.
That is
So
exactly how I was. That is exactly why I chose a liberal arts school because I had so many interests. So I completely understand that.
And I think you have to tell me whether you think you made the right choice. For me, I absolutely made the right choice because I could explore everything, but also do pretty much as much music as I wanted.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
I was in the orchestra as a violinist. I also did a ton of chamber music as a pianist and a violinist. I also sight read chamber music with buddies like all the time.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was.
I would say with chamber music, I wish there was more of that for me. We just have not had, and again, that's kind of like on our fault or not our part is, like we have violinist who was too busy who just couldn't do it because she was
uh,
involved with another major or some falling out. So it's been really hard to keep together like a quartet, but we had like a cello quartet. But of course we couldn't perform because of Corona. But I
yeah.
hope yeah, but again, it's so nice just getting in like a little group and just focusing on something together as a group. It's so much
Hmm.
fun.
For sure. And I wish you guys had more of that too. But as you know, scheduling is a total bear. Scheduling anything, I mean, even a duo is kind of hard sometimes. So a quartet, I remember one year there was a group that did an SQ octet. And I was like, I don't
Oh,
know how you guys work that all out. Did you rehearse for like 1 hour this semester? Like the 1 hour you all had free?
yeah,
I don't know
usually
how they
usually it is only
work
one
that out.
hour.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So scheduling, I totally understand, but that's probably one of the highlights of my college experience, the chamber
Hmm.
music. So I graduated with a science degree, actually, and I didn't want to be a doctor. And then I was kind of like, what do science degree people do if they're not doctors? There's nothing else for me to do. So I went into very general field, which is business consulting. So you learn all kinds of businesses. I was a pharma biotech specialist because of
Okay.
my science background. But that really opened my eyes into kind of the real world,
Hmm.
practical world, and the work. It was a great first job. And then at some point, most people go on to business school or law school or med school. We had people go to all three. And I've always loved kind of the writing advocacy part of law. So I went to law school and then I got a job as a lawyer. And then I practiced as a lawyer for a number of years. And then something about that was not quite right either. And so I was like, I need a change. But first, I'm going to go play the piano because I always wanted to do that. But I've always been
So
doing like 10 million other things at the same time.
yes, I'm kind of curious, like, how did it feel when you were like, making that decision, like, when you were practicing from one thing to another, did you just instantly like just know that, I wanted to do something else and it just
Not at
wasn't for
all.
you? Or was it
Well,
really hard?
it was really hard because there were a lot of great things about the law that I was doing that I liked, but
Hmm.
there are also some things I didn't like. So it was like searching for a negative, like it's like I know I don't like that, but I don't know what I do like. So I did a bunch of job interviews in law. I kind of looked around and I felt like my heart at the time was saying, okay, maybe you need to do something totally different for a little while. And music just kept coming out of nowhere. And I didn't
Hmm.
have a plan or anything. I just knew that I needed to explore like a slightly different part of myself.
Hmm.
So I had this crazy idea that I was going to take my vacation days and just audition for Juilliard as like a side, as like a,
That's just a side
trial
thing.
project.
I love that.
So here I am. I'm like working like 16-hour days at the law firm. And I finally I'm like, oh, I'm on vacation. And I sat in my apartment and I practiced for like 2 weeks straight.
Oh, wow.
And I did the audition and I went back to work the next day and I didn't tell anybody what I was doing because it sounds insane, right? And so I was working, and I get this email that says you've been accepted. And then I was like, now what do I do?
Wait, and so did you do like a preliminary and then was there two? I feel like today you have to like audition once and then audition again. Did that happen?
Yeah, so the first round is a screening round with a CD. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, pre-screening. And we had to do a DVD actually. So I got a couple buddies of mine, and they're very short. I mean, I think there's like one movement of a sonata, one song with a singer, and maybe something else. So it's a very short recording, and I was able to put that
Okay.
together pretty quickly.
Okay.
But the full audition repertoire, as you know, that
Yeah, I
list
know
is
it's long. Yeah, and all memorized.
all memorized. They can pick any movement they want. They can start you anywhere they want. I mean, it's you got to be on top of that whole list, as you know, for
Mhm,
grad school. So anyway, I got that acceptance, and it kind of forced my hand. I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, now is the chance.
mhm,
Either I keep working and I kind of try to search for this right career, the perfect career for me, or I take this opportunity that's been given to me and I just see where it goes. So
mhm,
I was not like on a plan, like
mhm,
10-year mission or anything. I was kind of following my heart and searching a lot. And
mhm.
things happened in the universe that said, give this a shot. Let's see what happens. So I waited till the last, and then at Juilliard admissions was like, okay, we need you to make a decision already. And I was at my job, and I was like, maybe I should stay at my job. And then finally, I was like, okay, I gotta go. And I quit my job, and I went the next week to do all these like
Mhm.
musicianship entrance exams and
Yep.
stuff,
You're like,
placement
man, I
exams.
didn't have to think I'd be doing this. Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, music history. Oh, what do I remember about anything?
I don't remember anything. Yeah, years ago. Yeah, I
No,
love
so
that.
it was crazy, and
The
here I
one
am.
thing I love the most about this, because it not only is it so unique, but it really says just how flexible you were. And I'm sure, like, even though it was so hard to make that decision, you just kind of like made it, even though you have how I describe if I'm making like the right decision, but it's really hard to make. I kind of have that nauseous feeling, like that
Mhm,
pit in your stomach, like, I cannot believe I'm doing this. Like, did I waste my time feeling? But you're just like,
mhm.
you know what, why not do it? Like, what's stopping me? Like, if I want to be interested in something else, and you just change with like nothing, you know what I mean? And I feel like that's really hard to do when you invest your time into something, and not just music. I feel like this goes for law, medicine, like things that you put like 10, 20 years into doing. And
Mhm.
so when you decide to change it and go a different path in your life, people question like, why would you do this? This is a good job that other people want, and not like ask you about what your likes are. So I feel like that's really
Totally.
important when deciding on a career like you did. So yeah.
For sure. No, I totally felt that, and I think there are 2 things behind what you just said. One is fear, right?
Mhm.
You're so afraid of what you don't know, even though you feel in your heart that it might be the right thing for you, but it's scary, okay? So
Mhm.
people are like, "Oh, it's so scary, maybe I shouldn't do it," as opposed to fear being a sign that you might be on the brink of something really
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So instead of that, and the second is that people like continuity, even though I think some of the greatest minds are people who jump from thing to thing, because then you're able to combine talents, combine experiences. That should actually be a plus, I think. But
Yeah.
the safe world really wants you to be like, okay, now I did this, and that logically leads to this. And if you jump off the track, I don't know what to think about you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that whole like decision making. Like I think I listen to like a lot of um like mental podcasts about like
Mhm.
and decision making was actually one of them. And like people like the president, like I think they interviewed Obama, President Obama, when he was in presidency, and he made sure that he ate like the same thing every day, wore the same thing, so that he'd have to like lessen his decisions because he could
Mhm.
spend more mental capacity making other important decisions. And so when we have this drastic change, it's like, no, we don't want that. Like it's too much for us to handle. We want like continuity, like you said. So yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
totally understand that.
decision fatigue is a real thing for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I'll go ahead with some questions. So,
Sure.
the first question I have is, what is the most difficult mental challenge to overcome as a performer? So this could have
Okay,
been like in school. This could have been like how
mm,
you developed. What are some challenges you had to overcome with even practicing? It could be anything.
so many.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Being a musician is so tough. But also, if you are a musician, you're kind of a superstar because you have to develop so many mental skills.
Mhm.
Um, I think I'll talk. The first thing that comes to mind is motivation.
Mhm.
Because as a musician, you're outside of a formal system for the most part. Like even if you're in school, nobody is telling you you have to take these courses and then voila, you're a musician. That
Mhm.
doesn't happen. You have to imagine where you want to go. You have to imagine what your recitals are going to look like, what kind of
Mhm.
musical artistic vision you want. There's so much self-driven goal setting as a musician that I think, let's say, daily practicing, that's all on you.
Mhm.
The smallest goal as, am I going to practice like right now, or am I going to practice in 3 hours? That's
Mhm.
all on you. Like so much of that is internally driven. And I
Mhm.
think that internal drive needs to be practiced. It's
Mhm.
not something that we're born with. We're
Mhm.
used to external motivation where the teachers say, do this by Friday. And you're like, okay, I'll do this by Friday. Developing your and listening to your own drive is a huge part, I think, of being a successful musician. And that's a long process, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so that actually reminded me of something because I've been talking to I don't know, I talked to a lot of my fellow cello, friends and other people who, are doing performance or music education. I feel like the one thing that gets brought up is what I like to call what did I name it? I wanted to call it like mental fatigue. No, it was going on the guilt train. So like you're guilty that you didn't practice, and then you just like waste your time thinking about how guilty you are of not practicing. And then you're like, okay, well, tomorrow's the day. Does that make sense? Like you're just like, okay, well, I'm not gonna just waste my time. I already just didn't practice, so I'm just gonna wait till tomorrow because I only have 10 minutes instead of like actually just focusing, practicing for 10 minutes, even though it's a little bit. And you think
Mhm.
that not picking it up is better than doing, playing for 10 minutes because you were like, I was supposed to practice an hour and I only have 10 minutes. I'm not going to practice at all. And I feel like, and then you feel guilty and then you just blame yourself. And I have not talked to one person who hasn't thought that at least once. And
For sure.
it's so weird because I think we have this idea too that we have to practice for a certain amount of time to think of ourselves as like, oh, I feel good that I practiced this amount of time today. So I like, there's a lot of people that set time limits on, okay,
Mhm.
I practiced for 2 hours today and you only
Mhm.
practice for this amount of time. And I've even had like time catalogs that we turn in and people would judge each other on how much we practice. And it kind
Yeah.
of made me feel like guilty or like everyone would know. And I won't say who the teachers are, but I know they had great intentions, but I think it
Yeah.
also has a negative side effect because you're judging each other's progress instead of just focusing on yourself, because everyone's different and is on a different track. So it's so weird how,
Mhm.
I don't know, we kind of do this because we're so competitive by nature. So I think, some of it's just kind of
Yeah, for sure.
happens, but I don't know if you have any take on that.
Yeah, sure. I think musicians are very, um, I won't say judgmental, that's not the right word. They're very critical
Mhm,
of themselves, and sometimes that comes out as competitiveness, sometimes it comes out as guilt, like you said, like
mhm.
judging yourself
Oh,
for
yeah.
what you did, what you failed to do. And that just comes from holding yourself to a really high standard, which is a good thing, except when it starts interfering with all of the behaviors that you actually want to do. So I think part of the problem with that is we set our goals kind of in a misaligned way. So if you say, I'm going to practice 2 hours a day, okay, that's a goal, but is that directly tied to the progress you want to make? What
Mhm,
if you said, okay, today I'm going to just look at these 5 measures and record them, right? That's
mhm,
a different kind of goal that doesn't bring into the guilt or this immense pressure.
mhm,
It's doable, it's defined, it has something to do with your goals in terms of like, this is a tough part of the piece. I'm going to focus on that. So I feel like when we
mhm.
make goals, a lot of the times we make them too big, we make them too vague,
Yep,
we make them
yeah,
almost impossible. And so of course you're going to judge yourself when it doesn't happen. Even
yeah.
though, sure, if you practice 2 hours every day, you might get better. Or maybe you might not because you feel crushed and burned out at some point. So I
Yeah,
think
and
goal
I think
setting is
we wanna
really
fit
important.
so much in one practice session too, which sometimes I find myself doing. I'll sit down and I'll just practice like 2 movements, but then I didn't really focus on the spots I was, like, really needing to practice on. So then I
Mhm.
asked myself, I could have just practiced these 2 measures that I really need to hone on for maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And yeah, because I feel like we do this with studying now because we grew up studying in large amounts out of, all at once, and we just kind of transfer that to practicing and then feel kind of guilty even though you did something, but it just
Mhm.
wasn't enough. So yeah, I don't know, like that's kind of how I feel sometimes, but again, I've been more productive just doing 10-20 minutes with the little spots that are really difficult in my pieces, and then I come back to it and I play through it and I'm like, oh, okay, that wasn't as bad, so it's kind of like
Mhm.
orchestra excerpts. That's kind of how I think of my pieces.
For
So
sure.
yeah.
And how did you come up with that strategy, or did anything in particular spur you to that approach?
um So I think last year well, okay, sophomore year before I had my sophomore recital, I was waking up early every day because I felt like I wasn't getting enough practicing in, and I wanted to get in at least like 2 hours of practicing in. And I just felt so fatigued. Like I was not thinking about how much I was sleeping. I wasn't thinking about, I didn't eat breakfast in the morning because I was just thinking of, being productive. It just didn't come to my mind. And eventually I just hit burnout.
Mhm.
And I was like, I can't redo this. Like, there's got to be a better, efficient way to practice because, I just don't have time, especially when I was working another job, to practice 2 or 3 hours a day. And I can't beat myself up. So there's got to be, I have to only focus on the spots that I really need to focus on. And I think Dr. Elfline actually taught me or told me about this a little bit too in graduate school for one of his recitals. He only practiced half an hour a day. He set his timer and
Mm,
really honed in on just the things that he had to practice. And
mhm.
he was ready for his recital, and he too had the same struggle. He's like, "Yep, I worked a job until 4 a.m. and then woke up for my 8:30." So
Yeah.
he's like, I had to do that exact same thing. So it was kind of the feeling of I'm not the only musician because on the outskirts, I feel like I go to music festivals or like camps or whatever, and I'll be seeing like kids practicing. Oh, my parents made me practice 3 hours a day. I'm like, how is that possible? And
Yeah.
then it's like, whoa.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
so yeah, it's difficult, but it's like I think a lot of people just don't talk about. You don't have to beat yourself up if you don't practice a certain amount, and that it
Mhm.
varies from person to person.
For
So
sure. And
yeah.
also what we don't talk about is that some of the people who have to be locked in a practice room, hopefully nobody's actually locked in the practice room, but people who sit and sleep and eat in the practice room are not being very efficient a lot of the time, right? So you're logging the hours, but you're not making the progress, which is why I think our goal should be tied to actual progress as opposed
Mhm.
to amount of time. And then you can actually see whether your time has been worthwhile as opposed to feeling guilty for not practicing as much as that guy next door in the next practice room, which
Yeah,
is a
and
losing
yeah,
battle.
and I think it should not be tied to so much time, but just, what time you're taking out of your day to focus in on the things that are most important.
Yep.
And then you're not having to focus so much out of your day. So your practice session could just be like 10 or 20 minutes. And if you have an hour a day, that's great. Maybe you can just run through a piece instead of focusing on like little pieces. I tell my students, I call them like puzzle pieces. So I'm like, take out this puzzle piece, and I call that like a measure or even half a measure. Because if they
Mhm.
can't get a rhythm right, I'll say, oh, okay, let's take out this puzzle piece, let's fix it, and then put it back in the whole picture. So I kind of think of that too.
For
Um,
sure.
so yeah, I don't know. I come up with just like random creative things that like children can also understand. Like if you were putting together a puzzle piece, like you gotta make sure these two fit together. So you gotta do
Mhm.
this over and over again, and then we'll fit it into the rest of the picture. Or yeah, or like stitching together measures. I actually got that strategy from Dr. Elfline when he was. I think I was practicing piano. I just could not get from one measure to the next, but I could play
Yep.
both measures. And so I was thinking of like stitching them together, like I
Yeah.
was sewing something. So yeah,
Yeah.
I thought of that one too. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
one of the things you're mentioning is as you go from student to teacher, you naturally start breaking down pieces into these puzzle pieces, as you call them, or issue spots, or whatever you want to call them. You start naturally focusing, and I feel like by the time you are a teacher, you understand that just playing through things is either just for fun or kind of a waste of your time at times. You see it in your students, right?
Yeah, definitely. They'll play through it and then it's like, okay, but did you really focus in on these few measures we talked about for 20 minutes last time and you got them
Hmm.
last week. so
Hmm.
so
They're
yeah,
like,
it's
yeah.
yeah, that's why it's so weird. I just give them like really small goals. I was like, just practice 4 measures. They're like, 4 measures. I'm like, yep, just 15 minutes. That's all I asked. And the parents are even like, are you sure? Like, is he going to progress? I'm like, I promise. I promise. Just simple things. But
Mhm.
I think we also have to focus on the simple things too. It's not just kids. I feel like focusing on the simple things and the foundations. Is stronger, or once you build that up, I think it's better to add in the difficult stuff. I was practicing Haydn, and I think that's the best example because it's like intonation, rhythm, all the really important things are like the fundamentals, but it's the hardest of everything going on.
For
So,
sure.
so yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will move on to the next question. So how do you deal with brain fog? And then I'll kind of explain what I meant during performance. For example, when you mess up or when it's hard to stay focused.
Mm.
So when I'm performing, sometimes like you'll get into it, and then especially when you're having a piece memorized, how do you stay focused? Do you ever get distracted? Are there any tips that you could give on what's best for performance so that you're not nervous, because I know there's always going to be a level of nerves, but how to limit kind of like that brain fog or freezing up feeling? And if you do mess up and you forget, how to keep going in a
Mhm.
performance?
Mhm. Yeah, memorizing is a whole nother
Yeah.
kettle kettle of fish. So I think what you're talking about in terms of brain fog is really the internal dialogue that's going
hmm
on.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the most damaging things is you make a mistake and you go, "Oh crap, I just made a mistake. Do you think anyone heard that?" And you get on this whole train of negative slash judgmental slash, you know, just disastrous
Yeah.
thinking that just and you're so distracted after that that you can't focus. So I think the question is for me about how you manage that internal dialogue. And for me, I think you need to be proactive about it. So what I like to do in performances is to have a couple keywords that I focus on in each section of the piece.
Oh,
So
okay.
this could be it could be anything. So for instance, if I'm memorizing a really tough piece, it could be form related. So this could be the return of this motif, or that's when the motif is inverted, that sort of thing. Or it could be,
Okay.
okay, the A section I want to be this particular emotion, but then on the B section I want to transition to this emotion. So I always have a narrative. I have a story in my head for every piece, and I think so far at Augustana, I played every recital from memory, I think that's
hmm
true.
hmm
Um, but
Yeah.
the way I do that is I have a word in my head, so it blocks out all that other negative talk, you know what I mean? Because on
Oh.
that page, I am thinking, "This has to be the most lugubrious section of the piece," or I have that
hmm
word, or, "This has to be the most joyful, ebullient part of the piece," and if I have that in the forefront of my head, then I'm not thinking other crazy things. And
Yeah.
actually, when I go off stage, you guys probably don't know this, is I have all these words written on a note card.
Oh,
So I
okay.
actually go in between pieces, if I go off stage, I look at the note card. I mean, I know what these notes are, but I look at the note card and I think, okay, my keywords are 3 to 5 words, and then I go back out. And that's all I need to focus and kind of keep the train of the piece going.
Oh, I love that. I've never thought of doing that. I feel like a lot of it is because I've always been told going in, and the most I performed memorized is just Bach. And
Mm,
even then, sometimes I'll get lost because I'm just doing it from muscle memory. I've really never
yeah.
had anyone teach me how to do things from memory. So I kind of
Mm,
just give up because I'm like, well, maybe I didn't start out young. So is there any way I can perform memorize? I didn't do this at a young age like everyone else does, you know? And then there's this
mhm.
talk of just like learning a language, like if you, oh, you missed out your opportunity, you can't perform memorized. And I just don't want to believe that because I know like deeply it's like this can't be true. So it's
Yeah.
so fascinating that you use words and like a dialogue for each section. And
Mhm.
that's so clever. Yeah, I'm definitely definitely gonna have to do that
Give
when
it
I
a
audition.
try. Yeah, yeah, for sure, and memory is one of these skills that can be developed anytime. So
Yeah.
you hear of these people who learn how to become champion memorizers,
Yeah.
because they become interested, and it's all about strategies. I mean, there's ways to learn that, and this is just one of the ways. I think memorizing is another topic because you mentioned muscle memory, and that's actually the weakest memory we have.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's the most susceptible to interruptions. So you're on
Yep.
stage, you're just letting your fingers go, and then
Yep.
somebody coughs, and then your finger, your mind goes over there, and your fingers are like, "Okay, boss, what are we doing now?" And you're like, "I don't know. I just heard that guy cough." It's
Yeah,
so
I that is the
interruptible.
best actually, that's the best way to describe, like, what I was thinking, and I just kind of with brain fog, since you're not focusing on anything in particular and you're just, if you're just focusing on what your fingers are doing or what you may think is next. I heard like if I sing the piece to myself or hum it, but I'm so focused performing, I'm not doing that. So it's like, what else can I do to get back on track? And I just kind of let my fingers just hopefully keep going and to try it and think of, okay, where's the spot that I know? So yeah, I think thinking of words and dialogue and even maybe like key sections, I think that would be really helpful too.
For sure. All the music theory stuff comes into play. Is this a sonata form? Where are you in the sonata form? Which key area are you in? What part of the sequence are you in? It's all helpful.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Okay, so next is, I think we kind of talked about this. How do you mentally deal with self-criticism? I always hear that musicians are our worst enemies, and I think it's true in some sense.
Yeah, we are. I would say we are our worst critics. And every time you record yourself, I don't know if you have this experience.
Oh my gosh.
I can't listen to it for a stretch of time. And sometimes
Nope.
it's a year. Sometimes if I need to get the edits back to somebody, it's a week. But I can't listen to it. I can't like play something recorded and listen right back.
Yep. I have to leave the room. Like people, like my parents or, a family of friends, they'll turn it on and I'm like, oh, I have to leave.
Yeah, and the funny thing is often when you listen back, you think, oh, that was pretty good. That wasn't so bad. Like the experience of it after the fact is different from the experience you had while you were making the recording, which is weird. It's like two realities that exist at the same time. But I think the self-talk, again, it's about what we tell ourselves in our heads, right? It's all this damaging stuff that has to do with limited potential. So let's say you made a recording and you really botched this one shift and you think, I can't shift to save my life. I'm a terrible violinist, whatever, as opposed to thinking, okay, that was that take and I'm going to do better the next take. So I think of this as a growth versus fixed mindset. And so often in music, we get into a fixed mindset because we think, oh, this is a mark of my worth as a musician, that recording right there, as opposed to like, that's where I was at that second. And the next second, maybe I'll play it better, or the next minute or the next day, I'll play it better.
Yeah.
If you think that way, there's like no pressure, right? You just do another take, or you practice for another day and you do another take then, or you practice for another year and you do another take then.
Yeah, and I think it's like a mixture of that and also just like a perfectionist mindset too, which I think a lot of people compliment, but I don't find it a compliment because it's like it's hard because we're just not perfect by nature. We're human. So how can you have that mindset of this has to be right before I sit in? And I think that also can eat you up because if you're doing record after recording after record and and then it gets just mentally tiring. And then you end up worse at the last tape than you did with the first tape.
For sure.
So I think it's important to know like that, and I hear this from a lot of people that it's not supposed to be 100% perfect, and I feel like people are looking for more than just a perfect output when they're looking at this type of stuff. So
sure. Yeah, having listened to a ton of audition tapes and having made a ton of audition tapes, I can tell you the first take is usually the best, and it may not be the technically most perfect one, but it has the most intention. And that's what you lose when you do 20 takes because you're just thinking, okay, don't screw up measure 55. And then you lose all storytelling, all the character, all the passion in the piece.
Do you have like a rule, like I'm only gonna try like take today like 3 times and then be done? Or do you kind of have a rule for yourself, like a limit?
I do. I've come kind of 180 with this. I used to be super duper micromanagey, and now I want to do one take. It's kind of insane, but I kind of love my live recordings the best, even though they're not perfect, because the intention is there, right? The electricity between me and the audience, that's all there. And then I don't have to go home and mark the score. Oh, I kind of missed that note and I didn't like that crescendo. I mean, it just kills the artistic spirit.
Oh, so many people do that. I mean, I've even talked with people where they're like marking through the score, or they'll tell me to hold their score and mark through it so that I can make notes for them.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
But
yeah.
I've come completely on the other side
Yeah,
of
I
it.
love
So
that
it's like,
though. Do you feel
but it
better just doing that? Like, I feel like you talking about it, it's better. Like when you're talking about that.
it's better, but it also leads me to prepare in such a way that I want my live performances to be almost recording quality. You know,
Yeah,
like
and yeah, and that's how you practiced it too. You practice it. How am I going to perform it, basically?
yeah, I
So
remember
yeah.
I was in a recording studio and I did a film recording. I was doing a couple piano selections for for a film soundtrack, I guess. And
Okay.
I was doing like one take of everything. And the recording engineer was like, you want to miss a note once in a while sometime? And I was like, maybe I'll redo one of these takes because I didn't quite like the feel, but I'm not going to agonize about, I prepared it to a level where if I can just sit down and get it out, I'd like it to be as perfectly formed as possible. And if
Hmm.
it's not, that's okay.
Yeah.
I hated the process of splicing this and pasting this and
Yep.
combining. I mean, it just lost all character. Yeah.
Yeah, which a lot of people do with like classical music when it's on the like an album. Like I'll hear it, and me and my friends will talk about like this piece. It's like, how can they not mess up? I'm like, there's no way. Like there's a recording engineer behind this, like to fix the little details. We just don't know. So
Yeah, for sure.
so yeah.
And sometimes
All
you
right.
hear it and you're like, "Oh, that was a bad splice. You didn't hide that one very well."
Yeah, no. If that ever happens, I have no idea because I'm just always in awe. So yeah. Wait, can I ask how'd you get involved with film score? Because I've always been really interested in that area. So like, did you have to audition for something like this, or how did you get in contact to do something like film
Uh,
film production?
yeah, good question. And I would say all of the cool projects I've gotten are because people have samples of my playing to listen to. So I had, for instance, my friends who get Broadway gigs or film scores or all this sort of thing, they're coming from outside of your network, so they don't know you. So
Mm.
you gotta have some really good samples on your website or some good videos you can send them on YouTube. So I actually had, maybe it was a mutual friend on Facebook who was like, "Hey, so and so is doing a short film and she needs some piano music. Why don't you guys send her your links?" And so I was just like, "I'd love to do this. Here's my website. Listen to some stuff." And that's how they get to know you. They maybe talk to you a little bit, but you got to have some really quality stuff up in video or recording somewhere so that people can get to know you.
Oh, that's great. So it's just like kind of like a bio website of who you are, your contact, your lessons. I kind of have something similar, but I don't have any recordings of myself playing. So do you have like
Mhm.
a separate what do you call it? You go on a website, there's different tabs you click on. Do you just
Uh-huh.
have like a performance, like, about you and how you play, okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
you can call it. You can call it different things. So it's usually a media portfolio.
Okay,
But
media
that's
portfolio.
really important because my friends have gotten gigs based on what they've put up. So someone would
Oh,
say, "Oh, you play Gershwin really well. I am doing a Broadway production of Gershwin. Would you like to
oh.
come and audition for that?"
And people contact you, or do you like, how do you put your voice out there? You said through Facebook?
Yeah, it's actually through your network, wherever that is. I'm an old fogey, so a lot of my friends are on Facebook. And we connect through Facebook, and I know what people are working on through
Mhm.
that. But any sort of network that you're on, whether it's a school network, some school communities have job boards and opportunity boards so you can listen in on. You just have to have something to show people how you play.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I'll think about doing that. That's a really great idea. And you created the website yourself.
I did. It's pretty easy these days because they have these templates that you can kind of throw up there and you customize the text. So I'm not
Okay.
a web developer or anything.
Okay. Okay.
But
Again, I don't know. I know you have very vast background, and I'm like, maybe she knows how to build websites. So just another thing to you.
you
So
know,
I just
I
wanted to ask. Okay. Awesome.
it's you can do it. You just got to find the template and spend some time to figure it out.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So anyone who's listening, you don't have to be a pro at making websites. Okay. I love that. Okay. So, um, what are some practice and performance tips that you would suggest when practicing for an audition or recital? And I should be a little bit more specific. So let's say it's like a couple weeks before an audition or recital. What are some tips to give? I feel like that narrows it in a little bit.
It does, yeah, because your strategy should change based on where you are in your preparation.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple weeks out, let's say this is a really important audition or recital, I would be, even earlier than that, running it through for as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you guys do this because we have the performance seminar, and you guys do it for each other, your studio mates informally, which is great. But at that point, you shouldn't be tweaking too much. You should be practicing performing. You should be
Mm-hmm.
practicing the art of being in that headspace and having those keywords in your mind and
Mm-hmm.
losing focus when somebody's unwrapping a Twinkie off to your side or
A
whatever it
baby
is.
crying.
Yeah. So you should be in that mode, and for a couple weeks would be great.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing I haven't actually practiced yet because, it's something I hear and I'm like, no, I can definitely fix these things. There's no, I can do it. And it's just, it's like just let it be. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's one thing. Like Dr. Elf, he's been accompanying me since freshman year, so we kind of just joke around now. He's like, just let it be, just perform it, just go straight right through it. It doesn't matter. And even when I recorded my junior recital, I messed up so bad at the end. And of course, like I knew Gabe would cut it out because he's the one who edits all the videos for us. And so I turned to him, I was like, that was so horrible. Can we just like end it and redo that whole movement just because I messed up the ending? And he's like, no, just let it be. Let's just keep going. And I'm like, how could we keep going? This was disastrous. And it's so funny. It's like it was such a disaster in my eyes because of how I practiced it. And I didn't allow myself to just run it just a few weeks before like I was supposed to. So I wasn't used to messing up in certain places, and I wanted everything to be just right. And allowing myself to mess up beforehand and just letting it be, I didn't have that practice of just kind of letting it be flawed. And that's the whole part of live performance. So yeah, it's really hard to kind of like let that go. And it sounds silly. You're like, it's live. You can't stop. Let's just keep going. It's fine. So yeah.
Yeah, it is hard. It is hard,
yeah.
but it's so important. Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. So last question. What advice would you give for musicians entering the performance world? And I know it's very weird with COVID right now, but even just like smallest suggestions to give. And you gave really good ones like going on, social media website, connecting to people, seeing what is available.
For sure. So you mean as a performer, as like a musician who wants to perform?
Yeah, not going so let's say I'm thinking maybe like after graduate school, because like what was your, and I know everyone's life is different when you're a musician, but what did you or did you see your other colleagues do after you graduated and wanted to find a career path with performance? And like you mentioned, reaching out to people and you found shows, film scores, traveling. I feel like it's so broad and no one's really, I don't know, I feel like no one's actually said exactly how they got to do this. They just said they've done it. And I'm like, how? And I always ask that question.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's the question, right? If you're moving on to the next stage, you got to know. So I guess I'll repeat myself. The network you have will be where you get your jobs. There's no like monster.com or whatever the best job board is now that says, hey, I need a pianist, and then like 30,000 people apply and somehow you get picked. It's going to be the people you already know. So be nice to the people you know, be close to the people you know, and let them know what you're doing. So be interested in what other people are doing. Go to their shows, subscribe to their newsletters, like put them on your own newsletter so that they know that, hey, I'm doing this really cool like Brahms recital series this year. It's just keeping in touch with people in your orbit. And as you guys go out into the world, like you guys are going to be the people doing things. And so
Mm-hmm.
you will know these people. And part two of that is that you have to be your own advocate or agent, I guess is a better word. I mean, back
Mm-hmm.
in the day, you had an agent, and that agent kind of like made waves for you and made things happen and just booked things. You didn't have to do anything, you could just practice. I mean, that hasn't happened in decades. So you got to
Mm-hmm.
put yourself online. You got to like write to series and say, hey, I'm interested in doing this. I mean, you're the only person that's going to be asking for opportunities on your own behalf. Nobody's going to do it.
Yeah, it's kind
You
of like
really
running
have
your own little business as a
mhm,
performer. Yeah,
mhm.
you're doing everything.
You're doing everything and you know the business best, so you know what you want and you're the best voice for yourself, but you do
Mm-hmm.
all the work. So there's a lot of work in there, but it's kind of a great situation because you can build whatever career you want out of it.
Yeah, like you can make it and shape it however you want, which is also a really nice thing with arts is that you can just be creative because
Mhm.
there's an unlimited amount of outlets. You're not relying on a manager to hire you to fit a mold like everyone else is for your output. Like you get to create that on your own, which is something I've always loved. I don't know, there's something very unappealing about working for someone else and you're kind of just doing what everyone else is doing. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like that. So I kind of like just doing my own thing. I've always been that type of person. So
Yeah.
again, I'm not dissing anyone that is doing that and going, through the norms of getting a job and all that great stuff. But if you are artsy and creative and have that like those ambitions in life, I feel like this is the right way to go if you want to be your own boss and be creative and do your own thing because there's so many different outlets like you said.
Mhm.
And one more thing I wanted to bring up, I thought it was so interesting how you said going to other people's performances because I actually did that. And I took the time to wait till they were done and everyone left to like walk up to the people and just sit down and talk to them. And I did that during like the first week. I don't know if you knew this, but there's the first week of Augie, like introducing freshmen and all that. I was a freshman advisor this year, and there were live performances of singers who would come in from like The Voice or whatever, and they would come and sit and just like sing, songs from their albums. And they do that Core does that every once in a while. And no one showed up to her performance except for me and a few other students. And I'm like, and so it was just me, her, and one other dude, and then that dude left. So me and this other guy who we kind of like bonded because he played guitar. I said I played cello, and she's obviously a traveling musician. And we just talked for like an hour and a half, and we had our own personal concert. She like sang us songs, like she was sitting right here in front of us, just fiddling around. She told me her life, and she's like, here's my email. This is what I do. If this is what you want to do, like, there's so many uh, outlets out there for you that you wouldn't even think of. And this is what, what did she quit. She dropped out of her like sophomore year as like pre-med, and she's like, I'm a singer, because she kept using all of her study hours to write music. And she's like, all right, I think this is what I want to do instead. And so she just did that.
Right.
So it's so fun just like sitting down with people and
Mhm.
talking.
Mhm.
And I think just making more time for that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
So
It's
it's so
part of
interesting you said that.
Oh, yeah, you're on the right track because that's part of your world, right? This is
Hmm.
part of your field of expertise. So, would you ever sit in a hole and never talk to any other expert in your field? No, you wouldn't. You got to go out there and talk to people about what they're doing
Or
to
sit
get
in a
there.
practice room, like we said. Like you can't. It's more than just like you gotta get out and talk and go to performances and
Mhm.
kind of live life in the world.
For sure, yeah. And I,
Yeah.
I'll, I don't know how much Augie students go to concerts outside of campus, but I think that's also really important. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping
I
you
don't
guys
think we do
apply for
enough of
that.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope once this is cleared up a little bit and things start going back to, we can at least move around and go outside city limits would be great, or school limits.
Mhm.
I think going and, I would even go to the Figge Museum every once in a while. I only did that twice. And I'm like, why did I not do that before? Like, I'm thinking like I had all these chances to like, and I didn't go to enough performances of the um, Quad City Symphony. I'm like, there's so many performances I just didn't take the time to go to because I was so focused on like my own productivity that I wasn't like being creative and being like, okay, I can do other things outside of school, and I think that's what students tend to focus on more, which, if you don't have the time, you don't have the time, but I wish that time was available. So I hopefully in the future they'll think about, what things can we do outside of school to also build up, you know, our creative liberal arts studies, whatever that means.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know, depending on the class, but yeah, I love that. Okay, so thank you. I just want to thank you so much for taking the time late at night to let me interview you. So thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, do you have any final thoughts or words?
No, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think being in the arts is such a privilege, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to sugarcoat how hard it is.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have one of those performances, when you kind of connect to people and the universe, it's just such a privilege. So
Mm-hmm.
I
It
think
really, yeah.
if you can have those experiences, it's totally worth it.
Yeah, during a performance, there's literally no words. Like when you have a great performance and then you just talk to everyone about it for like the next hour, 2 hours is like the thing that you look forward to the most.
Mm.
So yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's so great. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much for for just being here. So thank you, and
You're welcome.
I'll see you shortly. All right, let me.
Later.
Okay. So that was more for